Roll call, please.
Hickman here.
Dunstan here.
Brillo here.
Lorick here.
Kavich here.
Guzikowski here. Grill here.
Seifert here.
Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes of August 8th?
Hickman will make a motion. We approve the minutes of the August 8th, 2017 meeting.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Dunstan aye.
Brillo, aye.
Lorick aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzikowski aye. Grill aye.
Seifert, aye.
That brings us to significant common council actions. Carrie?
Common Council approved the following: a resolution approving an affidavit of correction submitted by HSA Commercial for the property at 7901 South 6th Street. Also, a resolution approving a certified survey map for Richard Beck, Henkel Corporation, for the property at 500 West Marquette Avenue, and an ordinance adopting an amendment to the comprehensive plan for the properties at 7581, 7705, 7725, 7751, 7765, 7781, 7811, 7831, and 7869 South 13th Street. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Carrie. First item, 5A under new business is conditions and restrictions for a conditional use permit requested by Lori Kopecki, United States Cell Operating Company, LLC, for a 120-foot tall monopole with a 6-foot lightning rod, total height of 126 feet, an apparatus and a gated and fenced compound on the property at 2330 East Rawson Avenue. Carrie?
You'll recall that this was recommended for approval at the last meeting of August 8th. Just for a refresher, site building and other related plans will be reviewed by the Plan Commission following council review. The conditions and restrictions, you'll notice, are shorter for this case than they have been for other conditional use requests, and this is due to local limitations on local control. So the setbacks that are included in these conditions and restrictions are the standard for the district. If there are any questions, be happy to answer them. Otherwise, the suggested motion is that if the Plan Commission is comfortable with these conditions and restrictions, that the Plan Commission recommends that the Common Council adopts the conditions and restrictions as part of the conditional use permit for a wireless telecommunications pole and associated facility on the property at 2330 East Rawson Avenue. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Carrie. We have a few speakers that wish to speak on the item. Is the applicant in the house? Would you like to say anything before the speakers come up, or do you want to answer questions afterwards? Answer questions now? You have to be on the microphone, sir.
I can answer questions now or after?
Well,
you prefer.
I think maybe after will be appropriate after the question's been asked, because I don't know what they are. Okay. First, Jennifer Wanta. 2135 East Ash Court, Oak Creek, Wisconsin, 53154. Welcome.
Hi. I understand the conditional use permit has already gone through, so I'm not here to change your mind about that. I just had two comments. The first one was, when looking through the minutes, I wasn't able to be here. I was at work the previous night. I read that it's not a highly residential area. I mean, look at it. My parents built a home in that subdivision on Highfield Drive in the 70s. They were certainly not the first home to be there. I lived there my entire life, brought my family back and built our home in that subdivision because it's a beautiful subdivision. It has a park, it has an abundance of children. We have a full school bus going to school every day, and to say it was not highly residential is highly offensive to me. I've lived there my entire life. Right across the street in South Milwaukee, it's all residential. There's an apartment 200 feet away from where that U.S. Cellular wants to put this tower. The other thing that really bothers me is that this situation just came up in Greendale. Greendale, like yourselves, that you admitted during the meeting, said, we really don't want it here, but we have no other choice. They made the choice to say no. They are getting sued by U.S. Cellular, but they made the choice to say no. When I was first a mother, I was told, your kids are going to ask you for all this stuff, and don't give in all the time, and don't give in all the time, and this is what changes their minds about how they act and how they think. And I feel like we just gave in to the toddler. We just said, okay, fine, we can't do anything about it. But a delay could have made it so that the things that are going through the legislation to stop these cell phone towers in such residential neighborhoods, maybe it wouldn't have happened, because maybe it would have been such a delay that finally legislation would have been passed, and that would have been fantastic. I feel like I feel like we didn't get represented in this. And I feel really sad about that because I've lived in Oak Creek my whole life, and I love our city, and I love our subdivision, and I don't know that I want to stay now.
Thank you, Jennifer. Just to answer a couple questions, to rebuttal, I guess, or to come back with you, I do agree with you. To say it's a non-residential area was an error. That wasn't made by the council. That actually was by the applicant. I speak for myself, but I think most of the commissioners would agree it's a very highly dense residential area. That was a stretch, to say the least. So sorry about the offense, but again, that lies with the applicant. As far as, you're exactly correct. We do have the choice to say no. Our legal obligations are to weigh the odds of what the chances are of winning in a court of law with this. And the money spent was basically the way we were told from legal was probably going to be a waste of taxpayers' money, which probably, I know it influenced my decision. And again, I don't think it's an appropriate location either. Unfortunately, we're very much bound by the powers that be. Next, we have Nicole Hashi. Did I say that correctly? Hoshi? Sorry. Hi.
I, like Jenny, live in that subdivision, as you guys know. And I guess I just had a couple of questions, which I guess would probably be more suited for the representative, or if you guys want to chime in.
Oh, Jennifer, did you do your name and address? I did it for her?
Oh, okay. I'm 2240 East Ash
Okay.
Court.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Okay. So I guess I did have a question. I know the permit's already gone through, but I was just curious what other alternate locations were discussed. If this was the only one, there are other areas, there's like an area like the flower nursery that's kind of next to Piggly Wiggly. That's also on an elevated ground, but not in a necessarily residential area because it is all corn flower fields, whatever. So I guess I was just curious why it had to be in this position and why it couldn't be maybe 100 feet over. In that area. So that's one of my questions. Do you want me to keep going or?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
My other question is regarding safety. So we've kind of driven around and looked at some of the other cell phone towers. We've also done some research online, and we want to know what kind of, fence or surrounding is going to be put around this cell phone tower. There are a lot of kids in our subdivision, and they play in the HOA property, which literally butts up, is probably going to be just a few feet from where the fence is. So we want to know what sort of safety or what kind of fence or whatever is going to be built there to make sure that kids aren't climbing on it. I mean, a chain link fence, what is a kid going to do? Climb it. So we want to know what kind of fence or surrounding is going to be around there to avoid any injury or to prevent climbing, that sort of thing. We also want to know if there's going to be a generator involved with that, because that would be a noise issue for us, because our property is very close to that. And I guess the last thing is, obviously we know it's going up. Is there any option for like a disguise, like a tree or something like that? I mean, it is literally right next to wetlands. Beautiful area with trees. So if there could be something that, obviously we know it's going to be a cell phone tower, but if there could be something that could make it less ugly, I don't know. But we did look up online, again, Google search, great thing. But there are a lot of options out there. I mean, to make it look like an evergreen tree or something to make it not just this big, huge metal protrusion coming from wetlands. And I guess those are my questions. So,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody else like to speak before we bring up the applicant? No? Please. Name and address for the record, please.
Todd Anderson, N64, W12883, Daylily Court, Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, 53051.
Mr. Anderson, if you recall the questions, can you take the location first, why you chose the site, and where else you look for alternate sites?
I did not do the site acquisition on this site. I'm filling in for Dick Rogers, who did do this. I don't know the other locations that were looked at, but I do know that we have to provide USLA with multiple, more than one location. So other locations were looked at, but I can't comment on what was looked at or anything like that.
Okay. Yes.
Weren't we told that we part of the legality of it is we weren't able to question the location or ask, maybe Carrie can fill us in there. We had some conversation about
Was it,
it.
Carrie?
No, it was that we couldn't require that it be located elsewhere. They can certainly, you can certainly ask the question about why this particular location was chosen, but you can't require it to go elsewhere.
And I think that question was asked last week, and he said, gave us some geographical map type thing of that's where it had to
Yeah,
be.
you know, tell me if I'm wrong, but the last time we went through a cell tower tussle, they try to pinpoint these things within quarter mile or whatever they got to do for coverage.
And that's getting even tighter now,
Okay.
capacity. It's, I mean, 10 years ago, get this tower within a mile radius anywhere, you know, in more rural areas. But with this, they're very precise. This site has to work off all the other sites that are already there. So it's not the days of spray and pray, so to speak, of just shoot the RF. That's very deliberate, and everything has to work off each other. So, yes. To answer your question, it's a very, what we call search ring. It's a tight search ring.
Okay. And then I thought he said something about height had to do with it. I don't really recall if he actually gave us any other sites that he literally looked at. I don't recall that.
Hope he didn't.
I don't believe so.
So unfortunately, we're not a lot of help on the location choices of why they chose this particular site. I will say this from a property owner standpoint, and I believe they're behind the gas station. There becomes an income stream with these towers for them to lease their property. So it's probably attractive to the station owner, I would imagine. But that's just a guess on my part. So, what about safety? Can you address the concerns about the fence? You know, how things are going to be protected there?
What's proposed there is 8-foot chain link with 3 strands of barbed wire. That's just industry standard. That doesn't mean, you know, if the city wants vinyl fence or something like that, U.S. Cellular's not saying no. They're just saying we gave the standard of what's out there. So, yeah, like was mentioned was vinyl fence, 8-foot vinyl fence or something like that.
Carrie, do we have anything specific for fencing that we like to see?
So that would probably come
When it
more
comes
at
back.
the site plan review
Okay.
portion. The Plan Commission does have the authority to determine opacity. And if that has to do with possibly altering the materials of the fence to achieve that opacity, that is within your purview.
Thank you. And then lastly, generator. Is there a generator on site?
There's not a generator on this site right now. I can't speak for what the future holds with that, but they're not proposing a generator. And they don't have generators on all their sites. It's the hub sites type of thing that a bunch of sites feed into. That's would be more likely to have a generator. But to say they won't have one, I can't comment on that. I just know there's not one proposed now.
Okay. I'll open it up for questions from the commission. Pat or Fred?
Go ahead, Fred.
I was just wondering about the lighting that you have at the top of the tower. Is there some type of flashing, or is it just,
We would do whatever the FAA requires. A standard is 200 feet and above is lit. 199 and a half feet is not lit. And this tower being 120, it should not be lit. And like I said, I don't have the FAA back, but FAA has control over that. We have no control.
And I can jump in here and say that the FAA, in their letter, did not require that this one would be lit.
I was just curious because of the airport.
Right.
And the
That's
runway.
why we're close enough. I didn't want to comment and say it's not going to be lit. I know it's.
Okay.
Pat?
Part of a question, Mayor, was the disguising of the tower. We've seen some things looking as different things as an option. I think it kind of goes along with Carrie with the fence question. Is that something we address when it comes back completely, or do we give some direction to U.S. Cellular that we'll be anticipating that?
You can give direction, but I think that would be more,
It-
it would be more appropriate to address that at the site plan review.
Okay. Thank you.
Chris, anything?
No, I'm opposed to this, so.
Greg?
I just have one quick question, and maybe this is for Carrie. I don't know if in the last meeting when we voted on this, I'm just reading through the municipal law now that we have it here. It just says if they are to construct a new mobile service support structure, an explanation as to why they chose the proposed location and why they did not choose to co-locate, including a sworn statement from the individual who has responsibility over the placement. Was that in the last package, a sworn statement from them as to why they chose that?
It was part of an email that came later.
Okay, I think. I remember
After
that.
the packets went out. So it's not in the last packet, but it was an addendum to that packet. So if I recall the conversation, they had a very tight area for which they were looking for a site, and that was partially due to locations of other sites and trying to triangulate where the need was. And I'm paraphrasing because I'm just trying to recall off the top of my head what the conversation was, but I believe that there was some more detailed discussion. It might even be reflected in the minutes from the last meeting.
And then as far as disguising, just following that question, I mean, would they be willing to do any type of special paint to color it different? Or I've heard that there was a flagpole somewhere that was a cell tower. I mean, are they open to anything like that?
The flag poles are very limiting to get other carriers on it too, because you have to fit all your antennas in a very tight area. So that takes away future co-location on the tower also. I've not talked to them about any kind of stealth with, a flagpole or something like that. And yeah, for any other stealth, that's never been brought up either. Painting, the standard color is just galvanized type color. I have seen other towers painted in, different shades but that's.
Dawn? Anything? Brian?
We brought up last time for other services to be on this tower. Do we need to put anything in our conditional uses that up to X number of services can be put on the tower?
What they've proposed can accommodate up to 3. So if this is what gets proposed, that's what will be, if this is what gets approved, then they will be able to accommodate up to 3. I'm not entirely certain that we have the authority to specify how many carriers. Yeah, I would caution you against requiring that.
I assume that goes to for the type of antennas that are installed on it. We don't have any.
No.
Ollie?
We're just kind of looking at the situation, and, we still haven't heard enough about site review, et cetera. But this is going to be coming up in front of the Common Council, And here's your chance again to, you 3 guys anyways, to ask these questions, to get more information about how they chose this site. Show some of the maps. They showed one figure last time, the area it cover, but they didn't show the surrounding ones, et cetera. And I said last time, when they used to come before us, we got a lot more information. And I think, Pat, you agree with that.
Correct.
This is probably the least information that we've ever had on why they put it there. Yeah, so that's kind of my comment. I'd like them to have more information available for the Common Council. May not be for us, but for the Common Council. And I would also, and Carrie, you gave us those 2, and thank you for giving us the information tonight. We've got the state and we've got our local. The 2 don't match up anymore. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So are we going to wait until this clears through the state flow of legislation, then look at updating it, or are we going to update, or what's our plan as a city?
Well, we can't do anything until the legislation passes. That could be tomorrow, it could be months from now, it could be years from now. So we can't speculate on that. We can't hold an application based on pending legislation.
But
And we
at some
can't
point
change
we may-
anything based on pending legislation.
At some point, though, we may be updating our municipal.
Correct.
Come out here. Okay.
Would you like to come back? Come on up.
So I just want to Oh, Nicole Hoshi, 2240 East Ash Court. Thought you knew me by now.
And they gotta pick up,
Yeah,
when
no,
they
I
do the
know.
minutes, they gotta
I
do the
know.
voices.
So I just want to, I guess, go on the record. You could say, saying I'm highly, highly against having barbed wire there. Again, I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and we have anywhere from newborns to, gosh, I don't even know, 11-year-olds, and they are constantly back there. So to have any sort of chain link fence and then barbed wire on top of that is just disaster. You know, I mean, they build forts back there and they have tree houses back there, and to have this, you know, and they can always play safely. And now if there's a possibility that we have something to climb on and then barbed wire, that's like a huge concern as well. So I just wanted to thank you guys for listening, and hopefully, you know, some of these questions that we brought up as being homeowners and literally being in the backyard will be taken into consideration at the Common Council. And, you know, you guys can obviously be our voices, so.
Well, thank you, and I think we'll take Wally's advice, and, you know, as the right person's here, we'll try to get that answer to the location and why this is so important
That would be great.
in your backyard.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
On the barbed wire and the chain link fence, I'm guessing that's standard protocol for safety and protection of your equipment.
Correct. But we have put in fences with no barbed wire, but it's,
Okay, so it's not required.
correct, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So I can offer possibly a compromise. If US Cellular is willing to put in a fence that may be more opaque, may also not include the barbed wire, you can go up to 10 feet. So you might be able to get that extra safety by going up an extra foot from where the barbed wire would end. So perhaps that might be a compromise. Also, in terms of softening that area, the Plan Commission also does have authority to require landscaping if that's part of the screening that the Plan Commission wants to see. So those are things that are also allowable per the statute.
Again, at the next go-around, correct?
Yeah.
Correct, that's site plan review.
Just to clarify Commissioner Johnson's point, I thought we were told at the last meeting that they legally had to accommodate the other carriers up to 3. So they can't really just, and that avoids us adding towers. Is that correct, Carrie? Do you recall? Or
I believe
maybe
there
the
was
applicant-
something said about they do have to allow co-location with other carriers. He suggested that the Plan Commission could require, and ultimately the Common Council require, a condition stating how many would have to be accommodated, or at least 3. I would still caution against that.
Can the applicant share if any of that, if you're aware of, if that is a requirement that the applicant, it is?
All towers, when you build a tower now, it's got to be built for multi-carriers. You have to let your competition on at fair market value, you know, that type of deal. They go back
So
and
we
forth
really
on
don't
each
have
other.
to
Can't
touch that.
monopolize the area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
And then just to cover what you guys would like to hear next time, Dick should be back. Where he looked,
The
type of
location
location is
choices,
looked at?
which ones he looked at, if they'd be willing to do a camouflage of the pole of some sort. And then the fencing issues, the options on that.
I think with the fencing, we'd be looking for direction from you on what,
Okay.
I would think that, in my opinion, what I've heard, that we'd be looking at some type of an opaque fence of a higher height without barbed wire, accompanied by landscaping,
Right.
to conceal it as much as we can, at least at the base. So if that's enough.
just with the, I guess with the landscaping, with as tight as this is, for space-wise, we were hoping that the fence would,
Twice.
so that you can't see through.
I know staff's got any recommendations on that?
Send a proposal, and we'll have the Plan Commission review it at that time. And obviously, if there are going to be any requirements, then we'll have to address it. But send us a new plan that shows the opaque fence and the details for the fence, and that'll be a discussion point.
Look, if landscape doesn't work, we can see that then, but if there's room to add it, we'd be looking to do that, I think, or interested in that.
Maybe you could build a fort for the association.
No other discussion, motion? Oh, Wally, you got
That's why
something?
I think the idea of 10 feet and with it being opaque, you want to make it so the kids aren't attracted to it, let's face it. I mean, you have a fence, kids love to climb fences. We want to make sure that they are not attracted to it. So I like some of the ideas that came up.
Seifert makes a motion that the planning commission recommends that the common council adopt the conditions and restrictions as part of the conditional use permit for a wireless telecommunication pole and associated facilities on the property at 2330 East Rawson Avenue.
Hickman, second.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Laura, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, no.
Corral, aye.
Seifert, aye.
For D? Yeah, we could do that. Carrie, are you okay with moving D up?
Thank you.
And then we'll take the Gallagher properties.
You want to move the last item up next?
Yes, I'd like to go to D.
If the applicant is here.
Is the applicant here for D? The land division for the certified survey map? Wesley Schaefer? All right. Cool. This is item 5D, a minor land division certification map. We are going to review a certified survey map submitted by Wesley Schaefer for the properties at 3607 East Fitzsimmons Road and 100-28 South Hillview Avenue. Carrie.
So this is a proposal to combine the two properties as was stated, and the CSM is on the screen before you right now. The purpose is to utilize the existing water and sewer laterals that are in the Hillview parcel, and as you may or may not know, there is a requirement that all sewer and water laterals be contained on a property. They can't cross property boundaries. And also, per the Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility, any unused laterals must be abandoned at the main. And that's a common requirement from them. There are a few revisions that are required to the CSM. The signature block needs to be updated for compliance with statute. There are duplicate signature blocks. That's just an easy take out the last page. The mayor's name needs to be updated to reflect Mayor Bukevich. The dedication language for the council block needs to be updated to reflect that that there is the dedication and the acceptance, not just the acceptance. And also, there is a requirement per code for a wetland delineation, and according to the DNR inventory, there are 2 pockets of wetlands. One is shown on the map that is before you as not necessarily a wetland, but a marshy area. And then at the southern end, there is a ditch that's shown, but there are wetland indicators according to the DNR, and that was verified by our stormwater and wetlands engineer. So with those in mind, the suggested motion is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Wesley Schaefer for the properties at 3607 East Fitzsimmons Road and 10,028 South Hillview Avenue be approved subject to conditions 1 through 6. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Mr. Schaefer, would you like to kind of speak and give us the history of why you're doing it?
Sure. The basic principle for me was just to save some money. Cutting into the road to bring the water and sewer up to the house I'm building, it's the road work is the expensive part. And when I found out those laterals existed already, I talked to Ron Pritzloff at the water department. He said, you can absolutely use them, but you have to combine those parcels. I ended up talking to Doug Seymour and Pete Wagner. They walked me through the process on how to do the land division. And, I based my costs on purchasing that property and getting the CSM was cheaper than cutting into the road. And that's what my whole premise was.
Sense?
Questions from the commission? Wally?
Yeah, I have, I guess it's to Carrie and maybe the fire department. I don't know how we get into this. Let me just ask it. Under the description of a proposal, he wanted to see if he could rename, the address would be maybe 3685 instead of 3607, which he's saying would make it better for police, fire response, et cetera. Did you look at that, Carrie, or what's our response to it?
We'll take care of that internally.
Okay.
It's not a concern for the plan commission at
Not a
this time.
concern. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Johnston.
No, the only comment that we have is the wetlands being delineated and shown on the CSM.
Proposal?
For that wetland delineation, what was the time restriction you guys wanted on that? So I did put out some feelers already, and I called every delineator around here, and they said they're completely booked. And they said this is their busy time of year, so I don't know what the time frame is for you guys.
In order to record the CSM, that has to be shown on it. That's part of the city ordinance.
Okay,
So we know that there's wetlands on this property, so it has to be delineated
okay, before,
before it gets recorded.
okay. I'll do what I can.
Anyone else? No? Motion.
Oh, sorry, one quick question, sorry. The zoning, if this does get combined into one parcel, what would the zoning be of this new parcel?
Carrie, I would imagine it's RS1.
The zoning would not change with this CSM.
No, you'd have to come back for that, but you want to know what you should put it to.
Yeah, because currently the bigger parcel, that 3607, that's actively being farmed, and that's A1. And the question is, if we combine those, is that going to change the zoning of that new parcel?
No, the zoning would be a change that's a separate request. The combination of the properties isn't an automatic rezone. So you'd basically have a split parcel. You'd have a split zone parcel.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thanks.
Okay.
And just to clarify, there were some questions from a couple of neighbors that I fielded today. This does not include another driveway off of Hillview Lane. This is just to tap into those laterals. The access is still going to remain off of Fitzsimmons. So just for that clarification.
Everyone agrees?
Clear?
Thank you.
Motion.
Corral moves the Plan Commission recommends the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Wesley Schaefer for the properties at 3607 East Fitzsimmons Road and 10028 South Hillview
Do
Avenue.
you have something to say, sir?
Oh, okay.
You have to come up to the microphone. Sir, sir, if you want to speak, you got to come up to the microphone.
Hopefully soon.
My wife and I own the parcel that abuts you.
Sir, name and address, and then you got to talk on the mic.
So I got 3 minutes to Ted Bertano. I'm at 10060 South 11th Avenue, and I own that property that's just that abuts just in the lower, the southwest corner, that big piece right there. So I was just going to ask on that zoning. You know, that little pie shape that you got is zoned residential, and then that your whole thing is agricultural. But you're saying it's going to be split agricultural and residential in the same parcel?
After this combination, it will be. That triangular parcel will remain residential.
Okay, yeah, and that was just what I was going to add too. And then about the driveways too. That was one of the questions I was the one asking that question about the driveways is, you know, the 11th Avenue is it's a dead end, and I think the restriction is like 15 houses on a driveway or on a dead end, and we have some like 24 houses. So houses are just kind of snuck on there over time. And then that's what brought us to Oak Creek 12 years ago, was we were looking at that 6.7 acres just to the south, just at the end of 11th Avenue, and that 6.7 acres that's just to the west of your property, and then abuts Fitzsimmons. That was a Fitzsimmons address, and we didn't buy it at the time, but when we were looking at buying that, putting a house on it, and then we came to the city and talked about it, and they said, well, you know, you can't put your house on that 11th Avenue because it's too many houses on there. You can't do this. So we were going to put the house on Fitzsimmons, and then we actually looked at extending the road. They said, if you want to put a house there, you should extend the road. So we looked at, you know, division planners and extending the road, and we kind of marginally break even for us if we did that and broke up the lots. But we were following the rules. But then the guy after us bought that property, put his house on 11th Avenue, calling it a Fitzsimmons address, and then all of a sudden put his driveway onto 11th Avenue, and then he's on 11th Avenue, and then he just changed his address to 11th Avenue. And then magically he snuck onto the property. You know, so and on the 2 acres too, we're following the rules on the 2 acres. We're not building on it, but if we all of a sudden all these little driveways can get added to 11th Avenue. Well, I want a driveway too. You know, if everybody's allowed to break the rules, I want to break the rules too. So that was my only comment on the driveways is if we can add driveways, I'll take one too. You know, on our little 2-acre property. So, but right now we're not supposed to add driveways. So that was my question when we came in to talk today. So it's that was the driveway issue. But yeah, as far as the sewer goes and everything, that's fine. So, all right, I got 47 seconds. All right, guys, thanks.
We ain't too strict on that. Sometimes we're strict on it, sometimes we're not. We kind of play it
the
by
40
ear.
seconds.
So you're
All right.
fine.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, if we're handing out driveways, put me down for one. Okay. All right, guys. Thanks.
Okay.
I'll answer that real quick. I have no plans of putting a driveway there. It's too much money.
Okay.
Good.
Pat, where
Do I
were
start
you?
over? Do I?
Yeah, start over
Great.
for the minutes.
Krill.
Anyway, before we start, anybody else?
Anyone.
All right.
Krill moves the Plan Commission recommends the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Wesley Schaefer for the properties at 3607 East Fitzsimmons Road and 10028 South Hillview Avenue be approved, subject to the following conditions. 1, that all unused laterals are abandoned at the main in conformance with Oak Creek Water and Sewer utility requirements. 2, that the landowner and mortgagee signature page is updated in conformance with the requirements of Wisconsin statutes 236.341 DM. 3, that a wetland delineation be completed on the property by Wisconsin DNR approved professional with all wetlands shown and clearly labeled on all pages of the CSM prior to recording. 4, that the signature page is updated to remove redundancies and to reflect the current plan commissioner chair and mayor's name. 5, that dedication acceptance language for the public right-of-way, Fitzsimmons Road, is updated in the Common Council approval block. And 6, that all technical corrections, including but not limited to spelling errors, minor coordinate geometry corrections, and corrections required for compliance with the municipal code and Wisconsin statutes, are made prior to recording.
Guzekowski, a second.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Clark, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Crowell.
Seifert, aye.
Great. Good luck.
All right, thank you.
Going back to item 5B, it's we're going to review a conditional use permit amendment submitted by Kelly Gallagher, SSV Oak Creek LLC, for an amendment to the time of compliance section of the existing conditional use permit affecting the properties at 6304 and 6340 South Howell and 137, 147, and 209 East College Avenue. Carrie?
The request is for an extension, as you said, Mr. Mayor. Section 11 of the approved conditions and restrictions approved by council on July 9, 2016 required the commencement of operations within 12 months of the date of adoption due to extended discussions with the DNR regarding some of the environmental issues on the property, including wetlands and the discovery of foundry sand. A building permit application has not yet been submitted and that time frame has lapsed. So the request is for 1 year. There are no other changes recommended or suggested. This would just be another year from the date of approval of the approval ordinance by the council, and that's been a little bit clarified in the conditions and restrictions. So if you could go to page 8 of 11. Under 11, time of compliance. The operator of the conditional use shall commence work in accordance with these conditions and restrictions for the conditional use within 12 months from the date of adoption of the ordinance authorizing the amendment of the conditional use permit. And that should, yes, the amendment of the conditional use permit, which would be September 19th, 2018. This conditional use approval shall expire within 12 months after the date of adoption of the ordinance, September 19th, 2018, if a building permit has not been issued for the use, and then the applicant shall reapply if that does again lapse. So that's the only change. Again, it's for a year from the date of adoption. That was taking into consideration council approval. If the Plan Commission is comfortable with the suggestion and the amendment to the conditions and restrictions as stated, the suggested motion is that the Plan Commission recommends that the Common Council approve a conditional use permit amendment extending Section 11, time of compliance, to a deadline of 1 year of the date of adoption of the amendment ordinance for the properties at 6304, 6340 South Howell Avenue, and 137, 147, and 209 East College Avenue after a public hearing. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Before I ask the applicant, are there any questions? That was pretty self-explanatory as to why the extension. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I think they explained it very well, why they couldn't make it in a time period, so I'm all for extending it to one more year.
Okay. I do have one comment. I'm not against the extension. I understand it takes some time, given what's been found. But I would request that the weeds are taken care of on the lot. We've had some suggestions. I won't call them complaints, but to take care of the weeds. They're getting up around 3-4 feet. If not, the city will be notifying the property owner to take care of that. So, not quite on the topic, but I guess that'd be you. Gary, Kelly?
Kelly Gallagher, 3114 East Hunters Ridge Way, Heber, Utah, 84032. I drove by it today. It was embarrassing. So we will get it cut down.
Thank you. Seeing nothing else, motion.
Dickman makes a motion, the Plan Commission recommends that the Common Council approve a conditional use permit amendment extending Section 11, time of compliance to a deadline of 1 year of the date of adoption of the amendment ordinance for the properties at 6304, 6340 South Howell Avenue, and 137, 147, and 209 East College Avenue after a public hearing.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Rilla.
Seifert, aye.
Brings us to 5C, review site and building landscape plans and lighting plans submitted by Kelly Gallagher. And it doesn't have a G. Self-Storage Ventures LLC for a self-storage facility on the property at 275 East Drexel. Carrie. How is it?
This is a request for site building and landscape plan, et cetera, approval for the property at 275 East Drexel Avenue. And unfortunately, my location map seems to have gone missing, so I'm just trying to find that. But as we're talking, the plans for the proposal are up on the screen. You may recall that this property was rezoned to LM1 with a conditional use permit for this use in May and June of this year. There are 6 buildings proposed. No overhead doors are facing the right-of-way or residential areas. There is a loading area on the south side of Building A, and setbacks are compliant for the buildings. You'll recall that the LM1 district has some specific requirements for this type of use, so my comments are going to be going kind of in order with what the staff report had. There's a requirement that no more than 60% of the lot be covered with buildings, and this shows a 57% lot coverage, so that's in compliance. There is a requirement for a buffer yard next to residential areas, and in this map, that would be on the bottom of these buildings. So Drexel Avenue is on the right side of the page. Can't get my cursor over there, but anyway, that's north. So the residential is on the east side. There was a Board of Zoning Appeals hearing in which the request was to modify the buffer area because the buffer would be a requirement of 20 feet in addition to the 30-foot setback. So in essence, this would have been a 50-foot setback. They did approve that the site plan as proposed. In other words, that 20 feet is not required, but there is a requirement for there to be extensive landscaping in that area. So the buildings as proposed are okay, and then landscaping has to be on the east side of Building E and a portion of Building A. Access to this property is from the private road on the west. There is no direct access to this parcel from Drexel Avenue. Parking has been provided in a couple of areas, and in the LM1 district, we modified what the parking requirements are, or at least clarified them somewhat. So up to 2 employees would be up on site, which requires 2 stalls, and there are 6 stalls that are proposed, striped. There is an office that's under 1,000 square foot area, so that would require an additional 1 stall, so we're up to 3. And then in front of each overhead door for the externally accessed buildings, that's buildings B through H, building B through F. So that's 169 potential parking areas for people who are going to be accessing those storage units. Now, the requirement for the interior for Building A is 1 stall for every 10 units, which would equate to 48 stalls for Building A. There are no specific parking stalls striped on the property to support Building A. However, there is an allowance for the Plan Commission to modify the parking requirements in accordance with the code section as stated in the staff report. Just for your information, there was a sign location that was identified on the north side as well as on the south side of Building A. Signs are not part of this review at this time. The landscape plan has been modified slightly after conversations with the city forester. And this is actually different from what was in your packets because we got a revision today. There are a couple of requirements for revisions to the landscape plan still. The existing public stormwater easement that is on the east side still needs to be made private. That is a requirement before we can approve a landscape plan. So while we're showing you a landscape plan here that has extensive plantings on the east side, we do need to have that other requirement completed before we can issue a building permit. And other easements on the property do also need to appear on the landscape plan, and that's per code. The other part that needs to be shown on here is the distinction between the install of the plants at planting versus maturity. So that's another code requirement that you need to distinguish the 2 heights so that we can tell whether or not this is going to provide adequate screening. And just for the Plan Commissioner's awareness, no trash enclosures have been proposed on site. So it is assumed that at this time, all trash would be stored inside Building A, and any future plans for trash location dumpsters would be required to meet the code at that time, should that happen. Before we get to the elevations and the renderings, I'll just give you a quick overview of what the layout is going to be, the internal floor plan. The only 2-story building is Building A. So we're going to focus on Building A unless there are any questions from the Plan Commissioners. Building A has a little bit different layout. The office is going to be on the 1st floor, and then the rest of the delineated areas are different units. So this is floor 1. And then floor 2 does not have a separate office area. It does have an elevator access, and then the rest is all storage units and a stairwell. So if we move on to the elevations, we're going to focus on buildings A and E for time being. Again, Building A is a 2-story building incorporating brick, textured insulated metal panels, storefront glass. Need to specify that that is going to be clear. EIFS and split face block wainscot, as well as metal canopies over the entrance to the office area and also over the loading area on the south side of the building. So what is on your screen now is showing the north building elevation. That this is what would be seen from Drexel Avenue. The west elevation, which would be seen as you're going in that private drive. And on the southwest corner is the wraparound metal canopy and the storefront glass delineating the office area. Moving to the south side, again, that wraparound canopy and glass for the office area continues. And then a little bit toward the middle, there's the loading area with a canopy over the sliding glass doors, the automatic sliding glass doors. And then on the east, there's the combination of materials that was mentioned previously. Building E is the other building that incorporates masonry, architectural metal panels. So the masonry wainscot, buildings B and E, are at the base. So as you can see here, these horizontal lines represent the masonry wainscot. That is on the west side of Building E and the north, south, and east sides of Building E. And the rest of the building materials for those two buildings are textured and horizontal architectural panels, and then the metal overhead doors, which again do not face the residential areas to the east. Buildings C, D, and F are all metal panel with metal overhead doors. So there are no, there's no masonry or brick or glass component to the rest of the buildings. It's all metal. And we have a couple of preliminary renderings showing what this would look like. This is again what would be seen from Drexel Avenue. This was a preliminary rendering showing the east sides of the building facing the residential. The northeast portion showing Building A facing residential. And a full side of the east side facing the residential area. Per section 171009 sub A2, EIFS and metal panels are not allowed as primary exterior building materials, so those accents must be no more than 25% of the visible perimeter, and a minimum of 75% of the visible perimeter must be constructed with acceptable glass, brick, or decorative masonry. This is all included in the conditions and restrictions for this. For Building A and a portion of Building E, those are both in the visible perimeter, and neither meets the minimum glass, brick, or decorative masonry requirement. The north elevation of Building A has about 63% brick and glass. The west and east elevations are less than 50% brick and glass. The north and east elevations of Building E are less than 35% masonry wainscot. The rest is metal panel. The Plan Commission by a 3/4 majority may modify the minimum brick, glass, and decorative masonry percentage requirement only if supplemental design elements or improvements are incorporated into the project which compensate for the modifications of the particular standard. Staff has recommended that the minimum requirement per code be met and that the proposed brick meets the minimum 4-inch depth and thickness requirement per code. However, that is up to the Plan Commission whether or not a percentage other than the 75% is acceptable. There are a couple of places on the site where there's fencing proposed, and we'll get into just a couple of areas. But before I get off of this image in front of you, which shows the east elevation, there are 3 evergreens proposed between, in this image at least, Building E and Building A. Behind that is an opaque fence. The opaque fence is proposed to be vinyl, and that came directly out of conversations with the neighbors. So that will be the only portion of the fencing that is other than chain link and gate. So again, proposed vinyl fencing and then landscaping in front of that. If we get to the rest of the fencing proposal, there is an emergency access gate between buildings B and F. There is an access gate between buildings A and B. And then there's a chain link fence with a gate for snow removal between buildings F and E on that southeast side. We will require details for the fencing, and that is a condition that will be required prior to issuance of building permits. If the Plan Commission is okay with these plans, with the proposed conditions, the suggested motion is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plans for the self-storage development located at 275 East Drexel Avenue, subject to conditions 1 through 10. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Very thorough. Very good. Are there any questions from the residents before we start? Name and address, please.
Excuse me, Art Mays, 7955 South Winbrook Court. So I'm a resident on the east side. Just want to confirm that the discussion is on the percentage of the metal on the siding of the building versus brick. That right now it doesn't meet the requirement, it's too much metal. But just a comment that the applicant has been very great in communicating and satisfying our questions and our interest as far as decoration and landscaping. But we also have the weed problem right now on that property, and it's way beyond 3 feet. So if that could be addressed also.
Okay. Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the assumption is that we're not meeting the minimum brick requirement for the entire project. They take all the buildings into effect, but the east side will have a masonry belt to it as well as the west side, correct? It would be buildings.
Buildings E and A on the east side incorporate the masonry and brick.
And building B also does too. Anything on the outside edges
Right.
shows masonry. The internal buildings don't, and that's probably where
C,
we
D,
lose
and
our
F do not.
percentages. C and D.
C, D, and F do not.
F?
F is on the south side.
That one doesn't incorporate a brick belt, eh?
No.
Oh,
It
okay.
faces internally to the stormwater pond for the buildings that are there. So for the Chase building, the Wendy's, the vet clinic, and the health clinic.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that clarification. That's where our percentages probably fall off. But as far as your view, you'll get the brick. Provided we pass it all. Go ahead, Carrie.
So again, if we are looking at the east side of building A, the east elevation of building A has textured insulated metal panels, the 2 masonry columns. There is a bit of storefront glass on the northeast side. There's an ephes accent on the northeast side. The masonry wainscot is this horizontal delineation on the bottom. And then there's textured insulated metal panels on the southeast. And if we go to building E, the east side of building E is textured metal panel and masonry wainscot. Again, the horizontal line along the bottom is the masonry. I can't make it any larger on the screen. I apologize.
Is this consistent with the plans for College Avenue as far as
College Avenue had a requirement for the minimum visible perimeter to be 50% on all buildings on College and Howell. So this is a little bit different. The requirement is for 75% according to the conditions and restrictions, and that's in the visible perimeter.
Right.
But there's, again, that requirement that for acceptable exterior building materials that's separate from the visible perimeter. So there's really 2 areas that the Plan Commission needs to consider. One, are the building materials just as proposed acceptable? In other words, are the use of metal panels acceptable as an exterior building material? And 2, is the Plan Commission okay with the percentages as shown for the visible perimeter?
Okay. Does the applicant want to say anything before we start?
Kelly Gallagher, 3114 East Hunters Ridge Way, Heber, Utah, 84032. I drove by there as well today and was embarrassed, so we'll get the grass cut there as well.
Thank you.
And then I'll turn it over to my counsel on some of the other issues that we're discussing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Plan Commission. I'm Attorney Brian Randall of Freebert, Finnerty, and St. John, 330 East Kilbourne Avenue in Milwaukee. And we appreciated staff's working with us. Actually, I think I had notes from a meeting back in February with Carrie and going through a lot of these issues because this project started before the LM1 district was even created. And we worked through that district and looking at those requirements as staff accurately reported what those standards were. And then we came through in April with the rezoning and the conditional use permit. And to the commissioner's question about how does this stack up with College and Howell, there is certainly a design intent here to make them synergistic, to make the projects look similar. And as our architect has calculated them, we actually have a slightly higher score with the premium materials on this one. As we looked at building A, we're at about 51.5%, and College and Howell had, as Carrie mentioned, a 50% standard. So it is true that we have the combination of that 75% standard as well as the premium materials, but in this instance, we're trying to be a little bit better than College and Howell. That was an M1 district zoning, which also has the 75% standard and premium materials. It's just that we addressed that at the standards, the conditional use permit, conditions and restrictions stage. And in this instance, we knew that we had to deal with it at the site and building permit submission. So as mentioned, though, we did add on the Drexel side a lot of glass, a significant amount of brick, and that that north elevation, 63% is what the calculation is. But as mentioned, overall, that building is at 51.6% as compared to the zoning ordinance requirement of 75%. For building E, which does face the residential, that one, as we've calculated it, and all this should be in your packet, our architect did these submissions, it's 34.3%. So that's that wainscoting band all along building E, as you can see on the plan, the bottom there. That's the east elevation of building E. So that'll have that wainscoting, which is brick the whole way with the textured metal insulated panel above. Most importantly, though, this ties together with our landscaping plan, which is, and we appreciated the one neighbor's comment about Kelly being responsive and willing to meet with the neighbors. He had a neighborhood meeting back in May, I believe. We've done outreach. We had a couple neighbors at the Board of Zoning Appeals hearing, and we actually then, as you heard, changed the landscaping plan to add the vinyl fence to be opaque and also added landscaping. So what we have, if Carrie would be so kind as to bring maybe the landscaping plan or the site plan, as it relates to that east elevation of building E, we have 30 feet of space that we're proposing a lot of landscaping. So we've heard the neighbors, they really didn't want to see that building, and yet we're still showing 34% of the premium materials. But as you can see with the landscaping plan, we have significant vegetation all throughout that 30-foot wide area. The added landscaping since we submitted back at the end of May is in the lower left-hand corner at that point. I think that was a specific comment in the staff report and with the city forester. And also right opposite that solid vinyl fence with the one gap. We're not having a chain link fence there anymore. We're having the vinyl fence plus then more clustered vegetation at that location. And right there is where the red box is. So we've added the landscaping. That's what all those kind of bubbles are around there. That's to signify for the benefit of staff where we added certain species at the recommendation of the city forester, but then also clustered them in response to some of the neighbors' comments. So with that, we submit that when you look at the standards of the change, the percentages and the types of materials we have, we suggest that the enhanced landscaping in those areas are that trade-off, that the consideration that we provide to make up for not having the 75% on that side. And then on the front side, the type of use that we are, the fact that we're set back with the stormwater pond, that we don't even have access on Drexel, but we have made the efforts to have significant glass and brick on that building A, as well as be compatible with the College and Howell site. It's going to give us kind of a brand image. So with that, as related to the staff conditions, we can work with all 10 of those, including the 4-inch brick minimum. I think that's relevant to the design discussion. The brick that we're providing is that 4-inch minimum. But condition number 2, we would ask that minimum 75% of the visible perimeter for building A be 50% or 51%, however you want to do it, but 50% was what College and Howell had for the visible perimeter from street fronts. And then however you want to deal with building E, again, that one is 34% plus all the landscaping in front of that. But the way the condition's written right now is 75 for A and E, and we would ask for it to be 50% for building A and 34% if you follow our chart for building E. And the only other thing is not on this list, but a condition number 11, we would ask that the Plan Commission find that our proposed parking plan and counts are sufficient for this project. And that is that we have 6 on-site striped parking stalls, but we also have temporary parking spaces throughout as those who may access their roll-up door, the overhead units, and building A as well. Kelly has given you information in the past about the average stay of his customers, the numbers that we have. My understanding is staff circulated our submission from 2016 with College and Howell just for informational purposes as far as the types of traffic, the number of trips, and that based on the same submission that we made to you for College and Howell, that the per code parking is excessive for what this project would command, and that we would ask that an 11th condition that the 6 parking stalls that we show plus these temporary parking throughout would be sufficient as proposed. And with that, we can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commission? Greg? Dawn? Brian?
There's one chain link fence that goes across the access drive on the south. And then there's another chain link fence on the south side by the detention pond. The gate that goes across for the main entrance, is that a chain link fence as well?
It's a vertical decorative metal fence that with pickets that are about 4 inches wide, and it's about 5.5 feet tall.
Okay. Any possibility of changing the chain link fence on the south side to more of a decorative fence? That's the one that faces the street. Not worried about the one by the detention pond, but the one by the street. That one would be visible from people coming in from Howell Avenue, by the vet, by the bank there.
Oh, yeah, sorry, in the back?
Yeah.
Yeah, subject to his requirement, as for either you're gonna request breakthrough or whatever he's gonna require, we're happy to yield to.
That's contemplated as an emergency access.
Yeah. You can get through
Said
a
he
lot
and
of
the
things.
Fire department.
It's okay. He was getting called up anyways.
Mike Kresick, Fire Department. As far as that gate, we certainly have options we can work with on making it decorative in nature. We understand the location. It will be strictly an emergency access, not a routine access for us, or we would assume any of the customers of this site. So we'll certainly work with the applicant to come up with a solution on that.
Assistant Chief, while you're up here, any other concerns that you see?
You know, I think the first comments that come to mind for the fire department in a site like this is site access. Now, you got 25-foot lanes throughout, and inherently the NFPA standard is a 20-foot access road. When you have 25-foot lanes, what does that do with your turning radii? We've talked about the radius before. They're going to provide me with their final calcs, but as long as they're meeting their lane requirements, those turning radius tend to work themselves out also. They tend to correlate there. So although a tight access for the fire department is not unusual for a storage shop facility.
Anybody else for Assistant Chief Kresick? Thank you, Mike. Any other questions, Wally?
There was comments at the end, I kind of lost track a little bit on that parking. You said something about 6 stalls or something on parking, and I was going to ask Carrie, is that covered in our requirements?
Well, I can just speak on the site plan that's up before you, and we talked about when Commissioner Johnson asked about the decorative gate by the building A, we have 4 stalls outside of the gate where the handicap access stall is located, and then 2 stalls just to the east of that on the inside of the gate. So we have 6 striped, dedicated parking stalls on the site. And then throughout the site, in front of each building where those roll-up doors are, someone could park for the 5 minutes that they're using that site. So we have 6 plus parking throughout. code, as mentioned correctly in the staff report, the way the LM1 district calculates it, we need 48. I believe it was 48 parking stalls throughout the site. And with what Mr. Gallagher's operational experience is, that would just be building parking spaces never to be used. It'd be too much for what he's proposing in this type of operation. So we believe that under the code, site-specific standards, you can look at this plan and this proposal and make that concession in your findings.
And Carrie, do we need it as part of our motion?
I'm working on the wording
sorry.
as we are talking here. So I am proposing something to the likes of that the parking showing 6-stripe and stall space in front of the overhead doors as stalls as proposed is approved, but let me wordsmith that a little bit more. As far as what condition number 2 is saying, I would rather not say 51%, 50%, et cetera. What I would rather refer to are the material coverages that were provided if the Plan Commission is going to approve of these specific material breakdowns. That's what I would want in the approval, just so that there's no confusion about 51% is 51% for each of the elevations. It's what's proposed as a totality, if that makes sense.
Just approved as proposed.
As proposed, right?
So I'm working on that language.
Okay, we'll continue on with our discussion. Anything else, Wally?
No, that's all.
Just on the fences, so we have a vinyl fence going along the east
Work with
side.
that.
And then what do we have going around the rest of the property if it's not a vinyl? Chain link?
Sorry, I'm hard of hearing.
All the way, wherever you're gonna have the fencing, is it just vinyl on the east side, chain link the rest of the way?
Yeah, so generally, it's chain link, vinyl coated for the areas that are outside of anybody using it, subject to any change requested based upon the breakthrough grate section and with approval from the fire department. Then the opaque fence, site-tight fence, was a direct request from the neighbors, which we're happy to comply with as well on that small 25-foot section. And that was mostly for headlights to not be going to their backyard or their living rooms. So that's going to be a site-tight, the term here is opaque, I guess, opaque fence there, and vinyl at the request made by the neighbors. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that it, Chris?
Yes, sir.
Pat, anything?
Aye.
Fred?
All addressed.
Okay, Carrie's still kind of working, so we're going to buy some time here.
I think Carrie's idea is really a brilliant one, because then it's not so specific to the entire thing, but it's specific to the components as provided by the architect on a per building basis almost. So that's actually a great solution.
I guess I'll just pump in my 2 cents. It's a pretty handsome looking building, all in all, for a storage unit. I'm glad you worked with the neighbors and suffice them. These are becoming rather popular throughout the city of Oak Creek. And all developers aren't created equal, put it that way. So I'm glad to see that you really took their concerns to heart as to what they're going to see and be back there. I think from the east side, it looks pretty good, all things considered. I hope the neighbors are happy with that. I'm okay with the mason area and the visible outside edges as proposed, as Carrie's working on this. I think it's pretty good use of the property, all things considered. There could be, I've said this before to other groups, there could be worse things that went in there, for sure. I mean, if you remember, there was a tire place once proposed there, and that would have been a nightmare, I think, for the neighbors. The hours of limitations, that'll come in later, I believe. But again, we won't allow a 24-hour. You're aware of that, so we're not going to go down that path. So. That's all I really have, other than we have to just get these restrictions right, and I think we're pretty well set to go. Do you have any idea when you may begin construction, if approved?
Right, so there was a limited issue of soil, and those borings have been taken, and the analysis has been done. and any and all components that were, quote, questionable have been hauled away already. And now our final submittal to the DNR, or in this case WDNR, is being finalized in the next 2 weeks for them to approve it. And technically they have 60 days unless they give a comment. And then they might have more time after that. But we have been told that it's extremely de minimis and almost a non-event. So assuming those days, an 8-week time frame for our construction plans to be prepared, then our hope is to break ground before the freeze starts.
I guess I do have one other question. In Building A, you have a freight elevator. I take it to the second floor, which is nothing but storage. Are there also stairwell accesses to that?
Yeah, there's two. As provided on the plan that Carrie showed, there's actually, the elevator is next to our entrance area where people will be bringing their stuff in and out. And then we have 2 stairwells, one in the northwest, I think, and I think the southeast.
Okay, just for fire compliance, I know there's always recall on elevator, just if somebody got stuck up there in a,
Those stairs up here and this and down here, and then the elevator right there with the X in it.
and just to reassure the public, you do have restrictions on what is stored there, whether it's hazardous material, paints, things of that nature.
Yeah, so typically the lease is about a 10 font size lease, except for a special section of what we do not allow to be stored, which is about size 20, dark black, high bolded font. And having done this for 28 years, I've continued to amend that, and I even include no fireworks are allowed in any of the units. So it has been amended multiple times to ensure in every possible way.
And no animals, anything like that.
Yeah, you can't, in fact, you're not even allowed to store food. So no animals of any kind. And just parenthetically, there's no electricity to the units.
That was my next question. Do people typically store automobiles there and run battery chargers?
Generally, they don't, but most of it is because there's a lip that is, it's a rain lip that allows the door to seat so that rain and water doesn't come up underneath and seep into the unit. And there's also a little bit of a curb. So getting something into them can become difficult at best. But again, there's no electricity to any of the units for anyone to run any kind of a business out of the units. And the sensors inside the building will shut down as well. Plus, it's shut down at 10 o'clock at night, so.
I see. Okay. Any other questions, comments? How we doing, Carrie? Not yet?
All right, let's try and see if these work for you. All right, so in lieu of condition number 2 as shown in the staff report, my proposal is that the exterior building materials as proposed in the June 19th, 2017 material coverage breakdown is approved. Concerns with that one? Okay. And then as for the parking, that the 6 striped and temporary parking stalls in front of each overhead exterior door as shown on the plans dated June 2017 are approved. No additional parking is required at this time.
That's number 11 then you're proposing?
That can be number 11.
Yeah, parking.
And does the Plan Commission want to make a condition regarding the fencing on the west side?
To continue to work with staff, fire staff as to a decorative entrance. Is that what we're talking about?
But do you want to specify that decorative fencing is going to be required in those 2 areas?
I think one of the it was Chris. Is that how you feel? Yes, sir.
Okay, so if that is going to be a condition, that the fencing on the west accesses are decorative and meet fire code.
Okay, ready? Which one of you brave souls is taking this one?
Oracle move that the Plan Commission approve the site and building plans for self-storage development located at 275 East Drexel Avenue with the following conditions. Number 1, that all building and fire codes are met. Number 2, that all exterior materials as proposed in the June 19th, 2017 material breakdown is approved. Number 3, that the exterior brick veneer meets minimum 4-inch thick requirement per code. Number 4, that the privatization of the existing public storm sewer easement on the east side of the property is completed prior to the submission of the building permit applications. 5, that all revised plans, site building, landscaping, lighting details, fence details, etc., are submitted in digital format for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications. 6, that all mechanical equipment, ground, building, and rooftop is screened from view. 7, that the final site grading, drainage, and stormwater management plans are approved by the engineering department. 8, that all water and sewer utility connections are coordinated with the Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility. 9, that the final photometric and lighting plan is approved by the electrical inspector prior to the issuance of building permits. 10, that the final landscape plans be submitted for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to submission of building permit applications. Number 11, that the 6 striped and temporary parking spots
In front of each overhead exterior door as shown on the plans dated June 2017 are approved. No additional parking is required at this time.
and 12, that fencing on the west elevation are decorative and
Meet fire codes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Lorik. Is there a second?
Kuzikowski will second.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Lorik, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Kuzikowski.
Perrello.
Seifert, aye.
And if I got everything right, that brings us to adjournment.
Perrello moves to adjourn at 7:22.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Perrello, aye.
Lorik, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Kuzikowski.
Perrello, aye. Right. Thank you all for tuning in. I'd like to thank our staff, our IT guy, as always, keeping us on track. In particular, our planner, Carrie. She really did a fabulous job tonight being prepared for this. So thank you very much. And thanks to our assistant fire chief for being here also. Again, thank you. Get out there, discover, and celebrate Oak Creek.